I'm here with James. Welcome to the Worth the Fight podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be here.
Great to have you here.
Absolutely.
So let's dive in. How have psychedelics informed your path?
So that is a loaded question. I have a history that started with a lot of recreational drug use, led to some pretty serious addictions that really caused a lot of damage in my life relationships, my career, and shifting my approach towards psychedelics from one of seeking fun and pleasure to one of seeking growth and knowledge and learning and expansion. That's really what allowed me to move out of that negative past into what I think is a very positive present and even more positive future that I'm headed toward.
Thank you for sharing that. That brings to mind so often people come to this path from the recreational end, and I know I started, was going to foster the people, and I was, and have a few grams of mushrooms, and I'm dancing. Before I'm sober, I'm like, these guys are all crazy, and then I'm having fun. I'm like, oh, I'm one of the crazies, but it's a slippery slope, and things can, we can slide down that hill eventually.
Absolutely.
And for you was there a moment that you had the awareness around, whoa, this is, there's something special here for healing. There's something special for, or I've got to figure out, or this current path isn't working?
So as far as how psychedelics impacted that, it was kind of a fortunate shift. I was coming out of a really, really dark, low point, rock bottom point in my life, where I decided I needed to make changes. I had decided to move out of the city that I was living in, cut ties with more or less everybody who knew the old version of me, who kind of, for lack of a better word, they kind of force you to stay within the box that you created for yourself through your young life. And then when I hit a rock bottom point on that, I had a realization after, sort of a drug bender, where I decided I either needed to make a change or I was going to die on the path that I was on. I was also extremely depressed and suicidal at that time. So it was realistically, this is going to be the end of my life, or something has to change and shift. The decision to change first started with cutting ties with the people that I felt led me down that path, or rather than led me down the path.
What was the path? If you can bring us into what were some of the struggles.
So it's kind of a long story to kind of start through it. More or less through high school, I was kind of a lazy student, a person who I tended to test really well without putting effort into anything. So I was really sliding through my life without any direct path or goals or like where I wanted to go. That stuff led me to seek pleasure almost exclusively. Pleasure is a short-term burst of positive emotion that feels like happiness. And at the time, I thought I was seeking out happiness, but really it was pleasure that comes with a cost. I think most pleasures come with a cost on the other side of that stuff. So it started out high school. I was just smoking weed a bit, just kind of being, for lack of a better word, a shithead. I had bad friends who were doing a lot of drugs at the time. Initially, I was resistant. I was hanging out with these people as they were going down worse and worse paths. And I felt that I was like the beacon of light and positivity in their life, and I was going to bring them up out of it. But in reality, what happened was being around them and the things that they were associating with and doing, it was leading me to become numb to the damage of things that could happen and how bad some of the things that we were doing. And that led me to try more and more and more drugs. I was like, oh, I handled this other one before. Now that we add in this, we add in cocaine, it's going to be better. We add in, Xanax or all these other different things, it's going to be okay. I had it under control with the previous thing. And then eventually it was like I was doing all these different things. And that's what led me down into a really, really dark negative path for it was a solid year to 2 years where I was really heavily using very, very hard drugs. And that was what led me into my rock bottom position. These friends of mine in high school were using things like pills. We all smoked weed, did mushrooms. At that time, I was like, I'm only going to do things that are plants that are of the earth that have always been here. So it was like mushrooms and smoking weed, basically. And then that shifted when I graduated from high school and I started going to college. I had really bad social anxiety, largely due to the drug use that I had done in the past and the false confidence that I had created under the influence of drugs. So when I moved into college and I started trying to deal with new and different people, I was extremely anxious and fearful and not confident in myself. And that was what made me start to use Xanax pretty heavily. I was relying on that as a crutch. Xanax tends to mute the voice in your head that says this might be a bad idea. So being on that on a regular basis made all the other ideas seem like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. So then I started opening things up, and it was like I tried cocaine at one point then, and I was like, oh, cocaine's also a plant. That's not a big deal either. That's kind of along the same path that I was doing before. And then I was introduced to what I was told was opium by a very close friend of mine who, now looking back, I realize he was dealing with extremely severe levels of drug addiction. And he had brought me in as a method to allow him and enable him to do drugs more. So he was sort of taking advantage of me at that time. But to him, he thought he was introducing this world of fun and pleasure and positive things to me. So one thing after another, like I said, it pushed me from things that were what I would call on the low danger, low addiction spectrum, like marijuana and mushrooms, shifting into highly addictive substances like Xanax, cocaine. And then when I started buying what I thought was opium, I started using that pretty heavily and regularly, primarily as a way to mute my emotions from things and be just okay with whatever was going on. And I was using that pretty heavily for the course of 6, 8 months or so. And then I started getting suspicious about what I was buying because what I saw on the internet didn't match up with the substances that I was buying. And I eventually realized that I had been sold really high grade heroin. And I had been smoking heroin on a near daily basis at this point. I was working at a pretty nice gym in St. Louis. I was still living in my parents' house, my dad's house. I had a decent car. So I was like, I've got it all under control. Even though I know now what I'm doing is heroin, it's crazy addictive. I was smoking it, I wasn't injecting it. So I was telling myself, I got it all under control. I'm not an addict. I'm not the same as these people whose lives are destroyed because I have my job. I was not successful at my job at the time, but I was like, I have a good job at a good gym. I
Yeah,
have
we
a car, I'm on a
rationalize
path. Yeah, it's a
stories. Yeah, yeah,
rationalization
yeah.
that everything is okay. And then there was a point, I remember the exact day, I had the same friend who was also my drug dealer at the time. He came over for me to pick up some drug. He was dating a super crazy, extremely drug addicted girl at the time. They pulled up to my house, my dad's house at the time. I popped out into the driveway, hopped into his car. My dad was dealing with some work stuff or something like that at this time. This is some summertime experience. And I just remember he looked back and he was like, here's what you got, but I also have crack if you want to try crack. And I was like, all right, I've already been okay with everything else that I've done. Let's try it. Let's see. And it was instantaneous addiction. Instantly, I wanted more of it. I felt like, oh, my experience wasn't quite what it should have been. He's saying it's better than what I experienced. I got to try it again. And then when I tried it again and I got to the experience level, the intensity of the drug that he had talked about. It was like the greatest sensation, greatest pleasure I had ever felt in my life. And so from that point, I had spent the next several months really heavily going down that path. I was using a lot of cocaine at the time.
And what was it that helped to break that cycle of that downward spiral?
Hitting the bottom of the downward
Okay.
spiral
Okay.
was what did it. Over the course of the next 3 to 6 months or so of me using drugs in secret, thinking I was holding things together, thinking I was maintaining my job, everything started getting worse and worse and worse. My relationship with my family deteriorated to where they knew I was dealing with something extremely severe, but they didn't know what I was doing. They knew I was using drugs. They didn't know the types of drugs that I was using. And it all culminated with kind of a weekend that I essentially blew up my relationship with my family, caused a huge issue during a family vacation. I flew home and decided to go on a trip. I got on my motorcycle. I was driving like a 2006 Kawasaki ZXR Ninja sport bike, goes 200 miles an hour. And I went to go to the Lake of the Ozarks, and I was living in St. Louis at the time. So Lake of the Ozarks is about 4 hours away. And I had just, like I said, blown up my relationship with my family, flew home to go to a friend of mine was having a party at the lake, 4 hours from St. Louis. I remember I took a bunch of Adderall, like 60 milligrams of Adderall or something like that. And I took, I think, 2 bars of Xanax. I got on my motorcycle and I went to go ride to the Lake of the Ozarks. My average speed was like 148 miles an hour over the course of this. I got maybe 2 hours into it and my gas tank was low. I had my GPS in my ear. So I pulled off to get gas, went inside to get, a Gatorade bottle or something like that, put it in my backpack, zip my backpack up to the top, hop back on the highway. I'm back to high speed again. My GPS led me on kind of a weird path at this point because I was getting close to where I was going. So I was on a rural, like 2-lane highway. My backpack blew open, all my stuff fell out of it. So I had to turn around, circle back to try to find my stuff along the sides of the road. So I'm just kind of eyes peeled looking at where my stuff is. I went around a corner. It was like a blind corner. There was a woman making a left-hand turn. I was not paying attention because I was fucked up and I'm looking all around for my stuff. I saw her last second, tried to dodge her, but locked up my brakes, went into like a nose wheelie and clipped the side of her car and flipped my bike, got ejected 25 feet or so. Again, I was fucked up. So I kind of like rolled out of it. I had really bad scratches on my shoulder. I had like huge cuts on my leg and stuff. But I was like, okay, I was alive, but my bike was ruined. My friends picked me up in their truck. So we threw the bike in the back. We went to the party thing for the weekend. Partied all weekend. I dealt with my injuries with just more drugs and alcohol. And then at the end of that trip, I was really in a bad emotional state. I was also physically pretty injured
Roughed
from
up,
the
yeah.
accident, and I had kind of sobered up for the first time. So I remember getting home after that trip. My family was going to be gone for still another 4 or 5 days after that. So I was like, all right, I'm home alone. I'm back. I need to go to urgent care to get something to deal with the pain. They'll probably give me a bunch of opiates and painkillers because I have injuries. So I went into an urgent care, and this was 2016. St. Louis had a really bad opiate epidemic at that point. Doctors were prescribing crazy amounts of opiates to people. I went into urgent care and they asked me about my pain levels, and I broke down. It was emotional pain that I was dealing with that they took as though my body was in severe extreme pain. So they wrote me a prescription for an obscene amount of Percocets. It was like 40 or 50 10 milligram Percocets, which is a wild amount to prescribe somebody that has like just basic scratches on their body. So I remember going home and calling up my friends, my like drug addict friends that I did this stuff with. And I was like, guys, I got a bunch of drugs, come over. So they came over, we started popping pills. Opiates put you really down. The one guy that was with us was a meth dealer. So he was like, guys, we're dragging. We should do some meth and pick ourselves back up and have a fun weekend. And I was like, all right, screwed. I've tried all the other drugs at this point, and I've kept everything semi under control. So we tried that, and then I remember almost nothing from that weekend. It was like 4 days or so where I remember bits and pieces, waking up in the back of a car while we were doing a meth deal or something crazy was going on, and they would pass me a pipe or pass me some other drug or whatever. I would hit it, and then I was kind of back in a blacked out state. The way it all ended, I don't remember exactly, but I think we did a bunch of meth the last day. And I went home and I was like, my family's coming back tomorrow. My life is fucked up. I don't really want to be alive. Everything is fucked up. I have to figure out how to fix this. And I was high on meth at the time. So I'm super high energy and like in this kind of manic state. I was living in my dad's basement, like I said, and I found a red permanent marker and I started writing literally on the walls, on every glass surface, every mirror that I had in my bathroom, my entire shower door. I was writing business plans and things that I needed to do that could make me money and like set me up for like a life, because I had not been building a life. I was working at that time what I would call a job with no, what is my next step? So in this messed up state, I wrote all this stuff all over my walls. And I remember I went to bed at, whenever it was, I woke up the next morning and there was literally writing on the walls. And I was like, I am not okay. This is what I thought was me being positive, and I'm horrified by what's around me, that this was my choice of how I thought I could repair things. And I realized that something is going to change. This weekend, I should have died on my motorcycle on the highway, headed there when I was doing 150 miles an hour. I was lane splitting through traffic, extremely dangerous, reckless driving. And like I said, I was on a bunch of drugs at the time. So the fact that I crashed my motorcycle at 25, 30 miles an hour and not splattered into the back of a tractor trailer at 150, that also kind of made a realization that like something saved me from that. And I was like, I'm alive now. I need to be alive for a reason. And I need to separate from the things that led me into this path. I'd had this thought in my head that I was always the person that made the best choice in my group of friends. The thing that I realized, though, I was given very poor choices. It was like smoke crack or do heroin or take a Xanax. And I was like, okay, let's do
Yeah,
the lesser of the
what
evils.
was it? You're describing of it. I almost have this like the thrill bumps of like the writing is on the wall. Like shit, there's writing on the wall. Like
Yeah, it
that's
was
that's
a
that's
literal
how.
wake up.
And we have these like programs in our culture, and for you to see that like, oh shit, I've heard this saying before.
Yeah,
The writing
exactly.
is on the wall, and then I'm looking at the writings on the wall. It's like whoa, was that like a light bulb moment for you? Like I have to make a
Absolutely.
change. This is as bad as it's going. What was that, the rock bottom, where you're like, whoa, I need to. And how did you come back from that? What were your steps?
So you're right. I woke up writing on the wall and I realized this is what people talk about with this. I had been sleeping at that time with a handgun under my pillow for weeks because I was extremely depressed. I was suicidal. I thought
Probably
about,
paranoia. You got, you know.
I wouldn't say I had paranoia too much at that point, but I didn't really want to be alive.
Okay.
And I didn't have a reason to live. Honestly, the only reason that I never acted on my suicidal thoughts at that time was because I knew the damage that it would cause to my family, and I'd already caused tons of damage. So when I woke up to the writing on the wall there, I was like, I did this. This is not me being a product of my environment. This is, I created my environment by the people that I associate with, and what I thought was making the right choice, I was choosing between a bunch of horrible, terrible choices. And those choices were in front of me because of the 1,000 choices that I had made leading up until that point. So all I knew at that point was I need to make a different choice. Something has to change. And the thing that I looked at and realized as I looked at my life I was unable to make any changes while living that life and being that person. And like I said, I had this realization that I should have died on my
Yeah.
motorcycle that
Should
day,
have be
right?
going 150 miles an hour. Yeah.
And so at this point in my life, I had always gone by Jim. Jim is my dad's name. I always looked up to him. It was when I was a little kid, I always kind of wanted to be called what my dad was called. Jim, the Jim that is me, made really bad choices with really bad people repeatedly. And I had a decision that I was like, I no longer want to be this person. So I had to think about all my options of what I could do to get out of it. But it was that rock bottom where I realized I'm at a crossroads here. One path is going to lead to my sure death, my family's extreme level of challenges that would come from that in the morning, and
Pain,
the
regret,
horrific pain and all of that.
horrific.
And I was like, that's one path. The other path is I make new choices on this. And for me at that time, I realized I didn't have the strength to make good choices when I was presented with bad choices. So the only solution that I could come up with was changing my environment completely so that when I was making choices, they were not choices that were presented to me by the same people that had presented the choices that led me down that path previously.
Just completely get out of your environment. We're a product of
Absolutely.
the people that we spend time with,
Hmm.
and when our environment is shit and we're hanging around with a bunch of losers, we're going to be a freaking loser.
Well, and the other thing that I think comes with that is you live your life into a box. The people that know you know the choices that you make. And when you start trying to make drastically different choices that are not,
They're going to pull you
they're
back.
going to pull
They're
you
going to
right
pull you
back
back.
because
Yeah.
they're like, that's not you.
Because
You are these choices.
when we try to better ourselves, that is going to subtly call out everyone else.
100%.
And if they're not on a growth path, they're going to take that as, what do you think, you're better than me? Or
Absolutely.
when there was a trauma bond that you're breaking.
Hmm.
The trauma bond is really easy when there's drugs and alcohol, and we're building our relationship around this, and we're getting high and this and that, and music, this, we can rationalize these things. But yeah, getting away from that can be really, really challenging. How did you do that? How did you cut ties? Did you just cut ties and just say,
So for me, like I said, I got to that realization point that I needed to make a massive, drastic change. My dad and my siblings came home from the trip later that day, and I was very clearly dealing with something, but I wasn't 100% open with them at that time what it was or what I had been doing. My whole family knew I was using drugs, but they didn't know the the level, the depth, the frequency, or how addicted and in deep I was at that point. And I wasn't fully ready to let them know that that is who I had become because I was extremely ashamed of it. So I don't remember the exact conversation, but I remember I had a talk with my dad at some point, and I was like, Dad, I have to move. I have to cut ties with everything here, and I have to go into a different path. And I didn't know what that path was at that time. I spent an earlier part of my life living on a self sustained organic farm in Hawaii. And that was an extremely positive part of my life, though it didn't have a path forward. If I had gone back to that, it would have been I'm living on a farm in the middle of nowhere doing nothing, and my experiences would have been very limited to that. And I wasn't ready to accept that as the end all finale of my life. I had never really lived or had any life experience at that point. So I was like, okay, I can't go back to Hawaii. I need to go somewhere else and do something. I started looking into jobs at ski resorts because I was really into skiing at that time. My mom at the time was living in Boulder, Colorado. All the ski resorts, this was August, I think. All the ski resorts that I started trying to apply to live on the resort and do, be a lifty or something like that, they'd already done all their hiring for the season. So I was kind of like, all right, I don't really have a whole lot of option. It's either go back to Hawaii or maybe go live with my mom in Colorado and just try to start fresh there. So I decided that was what I wanted to do. I told the rest of my family I quit my job. And I was like, all right, I'm on this new path. I remember being in the car with all my stuff packed up, and I was contemplating everything at this point. This is like the probably the longest period of sobriety from hard drugs at the time. I'm sure I was still smoking weed and stuff then, but I hadn't been using any hard drugs. And I was on the way to Colorado. And during my drive, I had this realization that the person that I was had to die in order to become the person I needed to be. And with that, in order for the person you were to die, you have to let go of all the things that that person held on to and loved and cherished, and had connections with and stuff. And they might rebuild down the line, but I decided in the car that I was going to become the man I was born to be, and I was going to let the lesser version of me that I had lived my life into this box. I was going to let that person die. Making that decision, though, doesn't make it permanent, because with drug use and addiction, especially, it's a constant daily decision
Yeah.
and moment by moment decision, because there's always the urge to go back and to use drugs and to fall back on your previous coping mechanisms that you had done. So prior to leaving, I had done a couple of LSD trips with the same guy who had been buying drugs from, and they were really profound and very, again, I would call them pleasurable at that stage. They were fun. It was not something that I was necessarily doing with an intention of growing. So I decided I'm done with hard drugs. And my friend had given me, I don't know, 10 hits of LSD or something like that. That was kind of in my drug stash. And I took that with me when I went to Colorado. Not necessarily, again, with an intention of using it to change my life or anything. But when I got into Colorado, my mom and her boyfriend were about to head to Nepal for a long trip. They were hiking to Everest Base
Oh,
Camp.
wow.
And my trip had kind of come out of nowhere. So they had planned theirs a month or a year ahead of time. So I got out there and they were like, all right, well, you're going to be here alone for a month. So it's just got to be that. And again, they didn't know what I was coming through. My mom, especially at that time, because she had been living in a different state, we had a little bit of an estranged relationship at that time. She had not known what I was going through at all. So at the time, they were trusting of me that they could leave me in their house for a month and I would be okay. I had maybe $2,000 or $3,000 left over in my bank account from my final paychecks at my job that I got. So I got out there. I was with them for like 3 days or so. This was like October 2016. And then they left. They went to go to Nepal. And I was staying in my mom's boyfriend's house watching his cat. He lived in a little tiny like carriage house behind a different house right in Boulder. He had this super old decrepit cat that I had to take care of. And his place was like very kind of like 1970s vibes, right? And I was there just being normal, smoking weed and kind of just like trying to figure things out if I wanted to go back to school or what I wanted to do. And then maybe within that first week, I was like, all right, I'm gonna trip LSD and I'm gonna have what I thought at the time was going to be a really pleasurable experience because I was in a really negative, poor state of mind. And I did some drugs. I did LSD at the time. I may have had a little bit of MDMA with that one as well. And I had a super intensive trip where all my previous experiences with LSD and most psychedelics were very in the moment, present, sometimes with the people I was with, sometimes it was me doing things on my own. This one was very different. It was extremely difficult. I remember bits and pieces of it, obviously, because it's an LSD
Was there
experience.
any I look at so much of the madness in our culture as a projection of unhealed trauma. When
Absolutely.
you were getting into the MDMA and you're sobering up from the hard drugs. You got a
Hmm.
new change of scenery, optimism. Boulder, Colorado's freaking beautiful,
Hmm.
happy people, hippies, all of
Absolutely.
that good positive energy, new beginnings. You're sobering up from your body's healing, from
Hmm.
recalibrating from some of those really, the dopamine receptors, all of that, the crack and heroin and all these things can be, I mean, we have massive hits of
Hmm.
dopamine, meth, dopamine, serotonin, and then there's this massive pullback. So your
We've
system
got
is
none of it. Yeah.
you're exactly, so you had the courage to kind of sit with the ugh. Our systems do recalibrate in time. So you're a few months out, maybe even a few weeks out. Our systems recalibrate pretty quickly.
Hmm.
You're having the LSD and the MDMA. Were there any, when you're talking about the difficult, challenging, was there any traumas from childhood that might have come to your field of awareness, or
Absolutely. So at that time, I was still recovering from the physiological addiction too. I was taking Suboxone that I had gotten from the same drug
oh
addict
man, you
guy who got
throw in the
it from.
pharmaceuticals,
He got
yeah.
it from his
Oh,
rehab and stuff. And Suboxone is what people use to quit using heroin. It
okay,
blocks your
okay.
your opiate receptors, so you can't use it again while you're on it. And it provides a little bit of the. It's like just a piece of the experience that you get without the real positive, joyful piece. But it's enough that allows people to try to stay the path. So when I did that first LSD trip, there was probably three or four in a row. So it's hard to say which exactly was which. The first one I remember though was really, really intense. And whereas the previous ones had been all fun and lighthearted and stuff, psychedelics often take you on a journey and you don't get to necessarily dictate the direction of that journey. So I was kind of along for the ride. And because of what my my mind had been dealing with over the weeks leading up into that and the darkness that I was coming out of, I had an incredibly dark experience. The first one really had to do with coming to grips with the friends that I had made and all the choices that I had that I had made leading up until that point, which upon analysis were extremely self destructive choices. And it was kind of trying to figure out how and why I was making those self destructive
Love it. Love the
things.
postmortem. Yeah.
A hundred
Like, oh
percent.
shit, I have to take honest inventory. Awareness heals, as Dr. Fadiman says, but also awareness can hurt. And these medicines can, we could sit in this dark, like, oh shit.
Sometimes it has to hurt for
Yeah.
you to
For
heal
us to
from
pay
it.
attention. Yeah. For it to be salient, for us to actually look there.
Yeah, for it to become
Yeah.
real and realize, okay, that was a huge impactful moment. So I remember in that first bit, it was more the last maybe 2 years or so. And it was things that I was dealing with my friends and how and why I was agreeing to do choices. And a lot of it stemmed from me being unconfident in myself for feeling like a failure in my life. And a lot of it, like you said, comes from past trauma, right? What's interesting though is everybody's got trauma. I had a wonderful upbringing. I had parents that loved me, who supported me, who pushed me to do great things constantly. But no matter what, whether it was from when my parents got divorced or things when I was a little kid or issues that I had with one parent or another or with my siblings, those things started to kind of come up. And then I also started to really understand my role that I played in those things and understanding that the challenges that I faced often came from people wanting the best for me, and my subconscious desire for self destruction pushed all of those people away. So it was during that, it was probably 2 weeks or so that I had three or four of these experiences. And for lack of having the ability to take you through the entire process of it, I was forced to deal with the skeletons in my closet. The darkness that was inside of me that it had made me think the choices that I was making were okay. And again, it comes back to self destruction that I was doing. I think back, somebody I met right around that time told me about a poem, Invictus by William Ernest Henley. And there's a line in that: I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. And that really stuck with me. And as I was analyzing all of this stuff, I realized I had been blaming everybody else. I'd been blaming my parents for fucking me up, or trauma that I had faced as a little kid fucking me up, and now I'm this fucked up person. I'm not the person I'm meant to be. And that quote really resonated with me, especially as I was going through this process of super intense realizations under the influence of psychedelics. Every single thing in my life that was wrong or right was my fault. I was 100% responsible.
Deep awareness.
And it was an understanding that we control everything in our life, good or bad. All the bad stuff that happens in some way, shape, or form, you are responsible for. And it's usually a very long string of choices that led you to that butterfly effect, if you will, of something that happened when you were young makes you latch on to these people. And then as they go down a bad path, you stick with them because you feel scared or uncomfortable away from them. And you feel safe and like a part of the clan, a part of the community when you are with them, which leads you to latch on even more to that stuff. So it was once I realized that I was the one responsible for this, I realized that I was the only person that could get me out of it. I realized, and I had friends, all of my friends at this time, everybody except for me had been into and out of rehab. The guy that I told you that was like my best friend and he was my drug dealer, his parents had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on his rehab, and he always went back to stuff. And the rehab that they explained to me, NA, AA, it's all similar. And I really didn't like it because to me, they were telling my friends that they were powerless, and you are always an addict. You will be an addict for forever. That's just who you are as a person. I didn't like that because I had just made this understanding that I was responsible for everything, and the choices that I made were what were responsible. There was no invisible hand forcing me to do this stuff. It was a me thing that I'd done every step of the way. And again, I realized I was the only way that I was going to get out of it, which was why I had seen all of my friends go through rehab and fail and end up back on drugs because they weren't ready to become the person that they needed to be to get rid of that. If your identity is a drug addict, when a drug is here, you're going to lose it, and I have to do drugs because I am an addict.
I'm so interested on how you broke that pattern. I'm hearing this supreme mantra that you grip to and having this moment of total accountability. I remember having that on my journey. It was a moment of grace, like, oh shit, like I am fucked up, but I created this. And if I created it, I can uncreate it. And it was
Only
like,
you can
yeah, it
uncreate
was
it.
just like such a liberating moment of like, okay, like shit got bad. Is like, but the same, yeah, again, that ability, that awareness of, hey, all the actions have led up to this moment in my life. If that's the case, and that I can channel this awareness towards the better version of myself. The psychedelics, they give us that capital P possibility
Mhm.
of ourselves. And you're describing some past traumas. You're describing the LSD and the MDMA. I'm a little curious because the MDMA, as you might know, is in phase 3 clinical trials with our federal government. It's poised to be the gold standard for a post-traumatic stress disorder. The way that MDMA works is that it quiets our amygdala. So we feel safe going to those traumas. So you're doing MDMA with LSD, even if you're not doing them in the same proximity, the there's some crossover. So I'm
Absolutely.
hearing that probably the amplified, the super MDMA of having LSD and MDMA, this super heightened awareness LSD is in phase 3 clinical trials with the federal government as a breakthrough therapy for generalized anxiety disorder. So you have this incredible opportunity here to work with these two molecules to get to the root of those traumas and maybe have a cathartic experience, maybe feel the traumas from childhood, or to actually finish the trauma cycle. And I think that happens. Sometimes we shake it out. Sometimes we cry it out.
Oh, for sure. There was a
And so
lot of
you're in a
tears
you're in
during
a
this.
deep cathartic experience. We're potent again enough where MDMA, 71% of people that have had chronic PTSD for an average of 17 years. These are arguably the most troubled of the bunch, so to speak. 71% of them no longer qualify for a PTSD diagnosis
Wow.
after 3 clinical trials and 9 non-drug therapeutic sessions with a male and female therapist, the
Hmm.
therapeutic alliance. Okay, I'm not alone. We can work through, and we
Hmm.
heal in community. So again, I'm just kind of painting this picture of like from a neurochemical standpoint, likely what happened. You're working with this 2 breakthrough molecules. They weren't breakthrough probably, what was that,
The 2016.
2016, so they weren't breakthrough then. Maybe I know
Some
MDMA
fringe
was
research
where
then for
we're
sure.
getting close to that point. So
Hmm.
you were vanguarding this, grabbing the bull by the horns to heal, to get right, so you can live a life and be prosperous, and be the man that you are here today.
Absolutely. The the mixture of MDMA and the LSD, like I said, it takes you kind of on a journey. Psilocybin does also, where you're
Mhm.
kind of along for the ride, and it's going to lead you down various paths and into memories that you may have never thought about. Without the MDMA, those memories can be extremely challenging to deal with. But when you have the MDMA added into that, you can think about these things, but without the underlying pain and aggressive response that your brain naturally makes, right? When somebody has a trauma, PTSD coming from a veteran or whatever it is, talking about that trauma is extremely
Really hard.
difficult
Yeah.
for people, which is a lot of the reason that they don't heal for it for so very long. Because every time they go back into that spot, they're pulled back into their inner child or whatever it was that they were dealing with at that time. The MDMA and the LSD combined, you're in a different mental emotional state.
Quiets the amygdala. That's the
Yeah.
science, says that it quiets the amygdala, so we can feel it, and then you get the
And you
heightened
generally
awareness.
have positive
Yeah.
sensations. So now you're going back and you're thinking about memories as your trip, your journey is leading you into random dark memories that you maybe never thought about. They maybe were repressed and you don't even remember them, but you're in a state where you're able to process it just a little bit better, or differently. And then the other thing that I think that was a really big benefit for me at this time is I was trying to essentially rewire my brain, my personality at this time. And one of the biggest benefits that I know from psychedelics, especially LSD and psilocybin, is it allows your brain to form new pathways, neural pathways, where you deal with things differently than you would have previously. And it allows, after you're off of the trip, you have an extended period of neuroplasticity,
Yeah.
usually for days or weeks or however.
3 weeks with psilocybin, they show the fMRI of our
Yeah.
brain during the trip, and then the same connections are made. Probably not the same intensity, but
Hmm.
3 weeks out, and potentially even longer for LSD, probably ayahuasca. I would posit we would be getting in that 4 to 8, because those are even more potent. There's
Hmm.
more. It's a longer experience.
When the thing that you get from that, the real benefit is because you're making these new connections, your brain is processing things differently. As I was literally trying to become a different person, I remember I made some Instagram post on the way there, something about how the person I was died and the person I was born to be is who I am from this point forward. That's incredibly difficult to do and stick with on your own, because no matter what, you're always going to have these underlying draws of who you were, your subconscious pulling you back into this thing that you've always been. The habits, the patterns return. But when you have this new connection going on and your brain is processing things differently, if you stick to the new path, you can become a new person. You can assume a new identity for yourself. And the identity that I assumed was, I am not a drug addict. The drug addict died on his motorcycle that day. And I am now able to do the things that I know that I need to do to become the person that I need to be. And at that time, again, I'm still extremely depressed. And it was even more challenging because now I had no friends. I had nobody really to talk about any of this stuff with. My family, I wasn't ready to let them fully in on what I had done, what I've been through, the drugs that I was using, especially because I was doing drugs in my parents' house and all this different stuff. So I was really kind of on my own through that phase. And I don't think it would have been possible to stick to that without my brain staying in this state of growth and new connections and being able to really embody and live into this new person that I was really trying to be at that time. So that first month that they were gone, I probably had 5 different LSD experiences, all pretty intense, powerful ones. Because again, I was coming off of being a drug addict, so I wasn't somebody who would dabble with a little bit of drugs. It would be like, give me a whole bunch and then I'm going to deal with whatever it is. But the repetition kept my brain in that state where it was maybe once a week for a month or something like that. And it allowed me to continuously make the decisions that I knew that I needed to make without the previous patterns of thought pulling me back in to the other stuff that I was doing. So it allowed me to stick to the positive path. And then at that point, I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be happy. And what I really realized was what I needed to do in order to justify continuing to stay alive was I needed to positively impact other people. I needed to make some sort of impact on the world, on society, on the people that were around me, and help them because I needed help. And if somebody had been there to help me with the help that I needed, I may not have gotten into that state. And the way that I realized I could help people continuously long term was find the thing that I am passionate about, that I can latch on to, and I can funnel all of my energy into to where I don't have the energy to seek out the other things and the pleasures. And the joy that I was getting from positively impacting and helping people, I got back into personal training at that time. The joy that I got from that was enough. I don't like to use joy and pleasure interchangeably, but joy and happiness replaced the need for pleasure. The pleasure that I was seeking
Well, it
is
was intrinsic. You were sourcing it from within because of your lifestyle shifts and changes,
exactly.
and you're serving people. It feels good. We're connected. That's probably what when we're stuck in drugs. We're seeking connection. It's an unhealthy. It's maladaptive. It might feel good in the moment. We're going to have the satiation. Oh man, I'm feeling so good, but it's shallow. It's not real. Instead of, hey, you're working out, you're taking good care of yourself, you're into fitness and nutrition, you've got clients to serve, you're accountable, you're part of a team, all these things that are adaptive and that will keep us, or keep our nose to the grindstone, so to speak. I know for me personally, I struggled a lot with alcohol and like it's just not aligned on my path anymore. I really hold my work as an empowerment coach, as a prosperity catalyst, really seriously. When someone gives me a big coaching fee, like I'm in for them, so I have to make sure that my lifestyle is in alignment. Yeah, I'll have a glass of wine here and there, but that's like the extent of that. And again, I'm hearing that how you've redesigned your life around your values, around your passions, around joy, around, again, pleasure from the inside, as opposed to kind of grasping for straws from the outside to get something to satiate that that void that we might, I think all of us feel it inside, and we fill it by love. We fill it by community. We fill it by feeling good and taking care of ourselves, and these admirable adaptive behaviors that clearly you represent. You know, you got really strong energy. You're kind. You know, you're the lead trainer at Anatomy, the hottest club in South Beach, and you know, you've got such, again, strong, grounded, humble energy, and that's a testament, of course, to the work that you've done. And I'm curious about, how do you keep the magic alive, besides some of the things that we're talking about, in terms of, you know, lifestyle design? Do you have any practices? Do you have, I know you're very fit. Do you meditate? Any journaling? Anything? Any prayer? Anything like that?
So I've attempted that stuff, especially in the early stages of it. I was trying to do all the things that I knew worked for other people. We were cleaning out our apartment the other day, and I literally just found a super old journal that I had had. And it's funny looking back into some of the things that are in there. I was never good at being consistent with journaling. I tried meditation back in those days. I couldn't figure it out. I didn't have any guide or mentor at the time to take me down that path. So for me, I had this realization at the time. This was after my parents got back, after my mom got back. I was like, okay, I need to help people. I need to do something. I need to live up to what my potential is. And I grew up always being told that I was very smart and I was capable of doing these very high academic type things. And every time I started down that path, I wasn't fulfilled by it. I felt like I was seeking money. And initially, in my head, when I was younger, I needed money in order to be happy. Some of the traumas that I had was growing up dealing with financial challenges in my family, and money was always tight and things were so the solution that I'd always had was need money, which was why when I woke up and there was writing on the walls, it was like 40 business ideas that I had that I thought I could make all of this money. And that's a band-aid on things. That's not fixing what the underlying cause is. And that was like when I shifted to, I am going to become who I was born to be. I'm going to be James. I was born James. I forced myself into being Jim. And Jim made really poor choices, didn't care about other people, only cared about himself. James is the idealized version of who I thought I could always be. So I had to figure out what what actions, what values does James have in order to maintain that. And then I have to continuously live those actions. Again, I was coming off of being extremely depressed. MDMA, as we know, is a huge rush of serotonin, often causes a downturn afterward, especially if you're using high doses of it. So a lot of people, when you're on MDMA, you feel so good, you feel so happy, you feel all this pleasure and joy. And there's the downside where you're like extremely depressed afterward. So even though I was making really positive realizations through these psychedelic experiences, I was coming down. I was having these negative things that I was dealing with, and I was still extremely depressed. And as I was thinking about my daily actions at that time, I realized it's no wonder I'm depressed. I'm self-isolating from everybody. I was not exercising at that time, which had been like the single most important thing in my life leading up to that. And I was forcing myself to go to school to do something that I really had no interest in because I thought it was what I was supposed to do based on what everybody around me had kind of been like projecting into me over the years. And then I realized I don't need to live into what other people think I should be doing. I need to find the thing that makes me feel happy, not pleasure, happy, truly fulfilled. And I felt happiest when I was in the gym. I felt happiest when I was doing something that I was extremely passionate about. You could hear me at the time when I would talk to clients about stuff, and even still, when you get me down a path and you want to learn something from me related to the stuff that I have spent all my spare time researching over the course of the last 10, 20 years, it makes me extremely excited. And I get so happy and I feel so fulfilled when I can pass this on to somebody else, especially when I know that passing this on to you is going to change your
Gonna change
life.
my life.
And
Yeah.
the direction, like I feel like when I meet with people, I have the ability to put them at this crossroads of the choices you made led you to you. Overweight, heart issues, cholesterol issues, whatever it was, you are the embodiment of your choices right now. And if you want a different result, you can't just go on a diet, get to that result, and expect that you're going to keep it because you didn't change anything underlying about you, right? So I think for fitness, for anything, if you want something different, you have to become the person that has the things that you want, the lifestyle that you want, the body that you want, the happiness or fulfillment that you want. And you're not going to get that by faking it or by doing what other people tell you that you have to do. You have to sit down and make an understanding and a decision that these are the paths, these are the daily habits that I have to do in order to become the person that I want to be down the line. So it was really a matter of figuring out what those things were and then doing my very best to stay disciplined along those things. And the thing with major lifestyle changes and the thing with discipline is nobody is perfect. Nobody is so strong that they don't need help or that they might fall back into old habits or patterns. That I don't know when
And
that
how do you
decision
create that
was.
awareness around that? I know you're not much of a journaler, and very, very well. Your approach to the gym could be your form of meditation. It's like you're connected. Like that's your, Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's his church.
Absolutely.
And you're there, and this is where you're spending time. There's community. There's your breath. There's, maybe you have your music. You're kind of getting into a trance state, and
It's a flow state,
flow state. Yeah.
right? Like I have ADHD undiagnosed through most of my life, but as I've learned more about it over the years, I look back on periods and I realize that time disappears when I'm doing something that I'm extremely passionate about. And that passion really comes out when I am helping somebody, right? And so every time I would do that, time would disappear and I would train 10, 12 people in a day. When I started working at a 24-hour fitness out in Colorado, it was just like the first gym I could get on at. And I realized this is what I want to do for a career. This is not what I want to do. This is what I need to do because this is the thing that I'm passionate about, that I'm able to put extreme amounts of effort and time because time disappears when I do this thing and I don't feel like I'm working. I feel like I'm having fun and I'm doing what I was meant to do, right? So as I would have these flow states, it would be extremely rewarding. Like I said, I would get through 12 clients back to back in a day where I've eaten nothing. I'm not even thinking about food. I would get done with that day that is, for most people, would be an extremely challenging day that you'd feel tired and fatigued. And I would get home from a 12-hour day and I would be the happiest, most energetic person ever because I felt fulfilled finally for the first time.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And the fulfillment, I think, is the piece that it filled the gap that I had, the hole that I was trying to fill with drugs over the years. The fulfillment of helping people and being extremely absorbed into passion, right? So as I did that more and more and more, it felt like I was using drugs. I would go to work and it was like I felt like I was having the pleasure of using drugs and I never had an urge to go back to that because at the end of my 12-hour day, I was looking at my schedule for the next day and it would be another 10 or 12 clients back to back and I would be so excited instead of wanting to stay up late. In the earlier part of my life, I would get off of work and I would want to stay up six,
Yeah,
eight
you were
hours. I'd
crushing
stay
your
up all
energy,
night
and you were showing up like a zombie the next
because
day.
I hated it. I
You did,
didn't
yeah.
want to go back in. I was like every second that I spend asleep means I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be back dealing with something that I don't want to deal with, that I feel like I'm not living up to the expectations of me, of my parents or my extended family or my peers or my teachers or all that different stuff. And again, the positive effects that I was getting from it, it made me excited to go in and do it the next day. So I wanted to go to bed early so that I could wake up super early and be at the gym an hour before my first client, which would be 12 in a row, so I could program and come up with all the exercises that they would do. And I would get so excited. And then I would take the people through it. They would be so excited about it. And then after time, what you would realize is the impact I was making on other people was serious and it was long term. And for some people, it was extremely life changing, where I was helping them through, you know, their dark night of the soul, whatever it may be, maybe coming off of a divorce and dealing with extreme depression about, you know, how you feel, how you look, or your body falling apart for, blood work stuff going downhill, all the health markers going downhill. After a while of me just giving my passion to them and then absorbing it, I realized that I was changing their lives too. And that made the reward that much more and pushed me to do more and more of the activities uh, that gave me that experience.
Powerful.
So it was like a, whereas what I was doing before was a vicious negative circle. One thing I would do would make me more depressed, which would make me want to use drugs more, which would make me anxious and then want to use a different drug to deal with anxiety. It was everything was making it worse. And the deeper I got into drug addiction, the worse I felt about everything. This was the opposite.
Positive feedback loop.
Positive
Upward
feedback loop.
spiral.
Exactly. I was going from my rock bottom to like launching up to the top, and I felt like a new person, and I was proud of myself for the first time in my life.
Well, super inspiring the way that you transmuted this experience. You found community, you found your passion, you're serving people, you're feeding off of that. I sense and feel, and I know that on my journey, like I have an addictive personality, and I've just channeled it to a much more adaptive addiction that I'm really that it makes me feel good. That is addiction that our society says, hey, two thumbs up. You're taking care of people. You're serving people. It's maybe addiction isn't even the right word in that context, but we're shifting and kind of channeling that energy in a healthy, adaptive manner. I want to be respectful of your time. This has been wonderful having this time with you. Very super inspiring journey of you sharing your challenges. Thank you for your vulnerability. I truly believe vulnerability is a superpower. Vulnerability with discernment is a superpower for this world that we're shifting into, and certainly your story and how you've shed your identity, uh, confronted your past traumas, made the courageous move of leaving this dark, toxic situation to start over, the power of strong intention and the power of right action has kept you on this wonderful path where you're again the pillar here at Anatomy, the lead trainer and a great guy. And again, I appreciate you sharing your brave journey of transformation so other people can possibly rethink LSD and MDMA when it comes to an intentional journey, because you shifted away from the kind of the recreational. And I know that there was some of those journeys with LSD were recreational. And we have that. And I think that people have that when we kind of break away from the dark group, and we start to realize, well, there's something more here. So again, I appreciate you sharing everything. It's been wonderful having you here on the Worth the Fight podcast.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to share my story and hopefully help other people who are on the same path. I think it's really important for people to know that no matter how deep you are in it, there's a path out. But the path out is on you. Only you can pull yourself out of it, whether that means seeking help and being ready to change and seek help. AA, NA, all of these things have helped tons and tons of people.
Therapy helped me. I know I
Therapy,
raised my
all of
hand.
it.
It was maybe the hardest decision that I ever did was saying, hey, I'm fucked up. I need
Well,
some
and that
help.
I think is the key. I think people can only make change when they are ready to change, whether it comes to drugs, healthy living lifestyles, whatever it is. If you're not ready to give up who you were to become who you want to be, you will always be pulled back into who you were. And you have to be ready to let the lesser version of you die and go away to fully embody the new version that you want to be. And I do think For a lot of people, environmental changes are super, super important for that. But the number one thing is it takes deep soul searching, and it takes looking within to understand where you may have made mistakes and how your choices may have led you to this point, to that point, and how your choices from here on can lead you away from that point. And for me, the psychedelics were the key piece that allowed me to kind of understand that and internalize that and then stick with that over a long period of time.
Beautiful. Great job. Thank you for
Thanks, man.
sharing.
Absolutely.